The first tip I'm going to be sharing on how to improve your baking is introduce unusual textures. Now, you can do this by different ingredients that can make your pastry more crunchy, that can make it softer, that can give you a smoother texture depending on what you are making. I'm going to give you examples of how I have introduced unusual textures to different pastries. For instance, there was a cake I baked and I used cake flour instead of all-purpose flour to give the cake a more silky texture and a smoother finish. To give the cake a more silky texture and a smoother feel to the mouth. Another thing I did was I made crispy egg roll. I added a crunchy coating to the egg roll and it really made and it really attracted customers to the egg roll. Another thing I did was I made crispy corn dog. I actually made the crispy corn dog for the crispy egg roll, and a lot of people liked the crispy corn dog. So I did the same thing with the egg roll, and they were really the stars of my menu. Tip number two: introducing unusual techniques. Now, this is kind of a derivative of the first tip. You can introduce unusual technique. This one, you can even decide to make a different form than the regular form the pastry usually take. Let's say meat pie, for instance. You can have your meat pie taking a different form. You can use a different mold to make meat pie. I remember this meat pie I used to have. It wasn't cut in the hemisphere like regular meat pie, but it was rolled like a sausage and it was really, really good. It had layers of beef and everything. It was really good. So you can play with technique you use in baking, introduce different technique. You can even give it a new name. The next tip is going to a culinary school called YouTube. I am proud to say that I got a lot of my recipes from YouTube. I got recipes from YouTube. I tried them out. I sort of added my own touch to it. I played with the recipe a bit, added my own twist to it, and I came up with my recipe. So do not underestimate YouTube when it comes to baking. I hardly ever had to pay for baking classes um because when I see a recipe and I'm able to understand, I hardly ever had to pay for baking class because I feel as a baker, if you understand baking recipe, you understand the foundation of baking, you'll be able to learn recipes more, you'll be able to understand recipes more, you'll be able to make your own recipes. In case you want to understand baking, like the foundational knowledge of baking, I have a video on it. I'm going to put the link down in the description box below. So you can go to a baking school, a pastry school if you want. That's for advanced level, but basic level, you can learn how to bake from YouTube and start your own business without going to a pastry school. So just don't underestimate YouTube. Try YouTube. If there's any recipe you want to try, look at different recipes from YouTube and get your idea on okay, this is the recipe. So this is the recipe I'm going to play with and decide how you are going to tweak the recipe and put your own touch. The next tip is to use parchment paper or silicone. Parchment paper has gained more popularity, including silicone mats, and I'm grateful for that. In the past, when we used to bake a meat pie in my parents' house, we used to use butter and flour to prep the baking tray before placing meat pie. And the meat pie always came out with all that residue on the bottom. And I never really liked it until I discovered parchment paper. And I used parchment paper to bake all my pastries that I put in the oven, like meat pie, chicken pie, and the like. So it kind of gave the pastry a cleaner finish. Now for the silicone mats are really good for cookies. There are some cookies that will get dried out if you use parchment paper because the paper will soak up all the butter in the cookie. But silicone mats will just bake everything right up without altering the texture or the fat content. So invest in silicone mats or parchment paper. Silicone mats, I really love silicone mats because whenever I'm out of parchment paper, I don't fret. I'll just get my silicone mat. I don't need to. I can wash it after using it. And according to the makers of silicone mat, you can use it 3,000 times before it gets degraded. So silicone mat is a very very good investment as a baker. What I'm sharing is design your pastry. I can't stress this enough. Whenever you are creating your menu as a baker, even if you are a home chef, you love baking at home for your family, you can design your pastry that you're going to be making for your family. Let's say you want to start making coconut cake. You can use a different kind of coconut cake than the normal coconut cake you see. You can say, okay, I'm going to add coconut flakes to this. I'm going to top it with coconut chips. Different things like that. You can add your own touch to your pastry. Design your pastry to make it standard, to make it, and it will get more attractive, and people will actually want to know your recipe and how the technique you use to bake that pastry. The next tip I'm going to give is to experiment with. Now, I might be a little biased in this because I love spices. I love the aroma and the taste spices bring, especially spices like nutmeg, cinnamon, ginger. I love the tastes and the aroma they bring to pastries. And okay, I'm going to give an example using puff puff. I used to make puff puff normally. I did not like nutmeg in the past. I just realized lately that I did not like nutmeg alone. Turns out I needed other spices to enhance the flavor of nutmeg. So I met a baker that bakes with mixed spice, not allspice, mixed spice. Mixed spice is I'm going to put a picture on the screen. It's this brand. There's this brand that makes make a spices that's the combination of spice and they call it mixed spice. It has nutmeg, it has ginger, it has cinnamon, it has cardamom, different spices, and the aroma is insanely good. So I started adding this to my puff puff, and it spiked my recipe. Like it just added more depth and flavor to my puff puff. So I started adding it to cinnamon roll. I started adding it to bread. I started adding it to different pastries, and it just give this aroma that is beautiful to my pastries. Tip I'm going to give is to protect your baking, and by this I mean avoid over browning. So, as a young baker, when I started out baking, I used to bake cakes, and some of them came out brown, some came out when they were just done. The ones that came out when they were just done were softer, moist, and they had like a nice color. So, when baking a cake and the cake is just done and it's past just done to brown, it started browning. This is bad for the cake because it's going to compromise the texture of that cake. The cake is going to be drier and more dense than the cake should originally be. So always watch your pastry while it's baking. Make sure you remove it when it's just done. This also goes for cookies, meat pie. Basically, pastries they start to get more dense. They lose their moistness, they lose their softness when they start to get brown. So protect your pastry and avoid over browning. So we've made it to the end of this video. I hope I've been able to give you tips on how to improve your baking. Thank you for watching this video. See you next time.